As you know, we are here to celebrate gaining ICF accreditation, which has been quite the journey for this masterclass and for the others that are part of our program. And I had this kind of idea, I think only 4 weeks or so ago. Hey, why don't we run a free masterclass this month along with in tandem with at the same time as our regular group, and open it up and celebrate. And I didn't expect for 1 minute that almost 500 people would register across the 4 classes. We only run 2 normally, and I've upped it to 4. So huge sense of deja vu today for me and for Zeenat, who is here with me on Tuesday evening. This is the 3rd time I've done this week. So ought to know it by now. No, I'm kidding. So thank you so much, absolutely, for being here to celebrate with us. Because we are ICF accredited, we absolutely need to stick on schedule. Here it is. This is the one with all my scribbles on. The ICF have had their eyes all over and approved. And because we need to stay on schedule, please do not worry. I will not be launching into a sales pitch with half an hour to go, because I wouldn't do that anyway, but we actually wouldn't be allowed to. We have to cover the content which has been approved. So the class will run until 2:30. We are on Thursday lunchtime at 12, aren't we? And it is a requirement for you to gain the certification and to be offered the ICF CCEs that you are here for the full call. We will be doing some practice. We will be going out into breakout rooms towards the end today. It is also a requirement that you are actually in your breakout room, because we did have a few people missing in action yesterday whose breakout rooms didn't have anyone in them. So it is an absolute requirement that you are here and participate in order to gain the certification. And of course, if you need to go, because sometimes we do, that's absolutely fine. There will be a recording for you to catch up. We just can't do the certification piece for you. What else do I need to tell you? So because we have to stay on schedule, I will be staying on the call for 30 minutes thereabouts afterwards to probably finish my coffee, to decompress, chill out, relax. And anyone who wants to stay and have a chat, I will be more than happy to answer any further questions you might have about the content and also about the forthcoming program. There is also a website link and a sales link, a sales page link and a calendar link in the chat for anybody who wanted to have a look at that and book a chat with me. If you're not able to stay on after the call, you can get in touch with me that way. So now that that piece is all done, we shall get started in earnest and move on to our topic.
Can I do a quick screenshot, Pam? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yes. Let's do a quick screenshot while we've got lots and lots and lots of happy people here.
Okay.
Yay. Can we do that? So you do a good wave, jazz hands.
I have to do it twice because I'm over 2 screens.
Yay. There we go. Perfect.
And I've got to do one more because I've got to go to the other screen.
Got a budding David Bailey.
We go 3, 2.
Yay. Oh my goodness. How many screens are there?
Okay, 74 people, and it's all yours.
74. Give yourselves a clap. First day 1. Yeah. That's funny. Brilliant. And yes, one other point on the housekeeping. Honestly, if you have messaged me personally, I have done my best to get that to everybody. And now that you know the numbers that have been involved, if I haven't done that, I apologize. We have done our best to get the link out in as many different ways as possible for you. And 74 of you have succeeded in getting here. So that's wonderful. Okay, so yes, if you have sent me a message, it's in there somewhere. I will get back to you eventually if it's about something other than where's the link and that kind of thing. So we've done our best. Okay, all right then. Ta-da. Limiting beliefs and limiting beliefs. That's what we are talking about today. And obviously it is a topic which has captured people's attention. That goes without saying, doesn't it, at this point? And it's really interesting as to why. And that's actually where we start, because when I teach, I start with the big why, followed by the what is it we're covering, and then the how are we actually going to apply this content so that you go away with tools that you can use in your very next session with your clients. So tomorrow or later this afternoon, even. People have done that before. So the big why, limiting beliefs. Why are we here for 2.5 hours to talk about limiting beliefs? Because albeit this was a free session, you are giving up 2.5 hours of your time. So it's not really free, because time has a value. And I appreciate you all for being here and for making that commitment. So why? Well, I think 23 years of experience now since I qualified as a coach. And in that time, what I have noticed, almost always, when a client is stuck, for want of a better word, when a client has come to you and said, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z, and then they don't take the actions that they need to take to make that happen. When a client procrastinates, however you want to describe that phenomenon, I usually use stuck. What I have found is that more often than not, it is because that client has usually what we might call a cluster of limiting beliefs going on, which they are holding on to, because holding on to those limiting beliefs in some way is actually serving them. And that kind of sounds like, well, that's kind of strange, because it's a limiting belief, it's limiting them. How can it be serving them? It will be, otherwise they would just let go of it. Okay, so that has been what I have noticed. And the other thing that I have noticed over the years is that whilst coaches all talk about limiting beliefs, it's a big thing. Clearly it's a very interesting topic. Many of the coaches who I have spoken to actually have very little awareness of what a limiting belief, were they to meet it, actually sounds like. It's become this, what we call in NLP, a nominalization, a big word that we use to describe what exactly. And we all think we know what we're talking about when we say limiting beliefs. And in fact, many coaches do not have the specific knowledge that they need to, one, recognize the limiting belief when they meet it, and two, to then do something with it. And yet, that is what is holding most of clients back. So it's really important. That is why this is so important, so that you can actually assist your clients so that it's better for you as a coach when you're able to do that. It's more personally rewarding when your clients do achieve their goals And some coaches make promises as well. So you absolutely need to be able to deliver on those promises if that's how you present your business and that's how you operate. And then what about your business? It's not great for business if your clients are stuck. When your clients achieve their goals, they go away and talk to people. Word of mouth, we used to call it in the good old days. And they recommend you. And that way, it's a slow burn, admittedly, that way your business will build. Okay. So it's a huge, huge why. And time again, it seems to me that coach training in this respect is woefully inadequate. I ran my trainers training, have been running it all year. And one of my colleagues, Kirsten Javo, she's a PCC, very prominent. She's South African. She didn't know this stuff that she's been learning with me. And she was, why don't we know this stuff? Why don't we get taught this stuff? So woefully inadequate, some trainings, not all, but many. So that's the big, big why we're here. And then there's another aspect to this. And this is my personal belief. It seems to me at the moment that the conditions of hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness are endemic in our society. And whilst I'm not advocating that you work with family members, sit down and run a session with them, what I know is that when you have access to these skills, they become part of who you are and how you operate. And the more people who have access to these skills, and actually that's why I've not been too strict on the coaches all this time, the more people who have access to this awareness and these skills, the better that is for our society, because those conditions, hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, are all underpinned by limiting beliefs. Hopelessness is when someone believes in their own capability, but thinks the situation is hopeless. Helplessness is when your client thinks that a goal can be achieved, but they can't. And worthlessness is when they think it can be achieved, but that they don't deserve to achieve it. All of those are underpinned by limiting beliefs. And it's my big picture, my mission, and it always has been, to bring NLP to a wider audience, even though my version of NLP is quite different from what you might understand by those 3 letters, and we'll cover that. It's to bring NLP to a wider audience, and that's what we are achieving here today with this huge, huge session. I've never seen as many people in a Zoom room, so thank you. So that is our big, big why. Pretty important. So whatever I can give you in the next couple of hours to send you out there more equipped to work with your clients' limiting beliefs, then that can only be a good thing. And I will be very happy to be able to facilitate that. So should we talk about the what? I think we need to talk about the what limiting, what beliefs are and what limiting beliefs are, so that we're all on the same page. Okay, with that, let's do that. I'm going to share, if I may, I can find where I need to be fairly quickly, hopefully. Okay, need the glasses on for a moment. Oh, no, not that one. Yay, here we go. you will all have received some login details for the platform where I've gone to now. If you've not seen them, have a look in the junk. If they're not in the junk, let me know because we can reissue them. Maggie and Lisa, we've moved temporarily, so don't get confused about this, okay? All right, so, and in here, what I've done, just to show you, I have uploaded the lovely workbook. That's also in the Facebook group. It's gone out by email. We've done everything we can to get this out to you, but it's there as well, should you need it. Okay, and we've covered why. We're going to have a look at the what. What are beliefs and limiting beliefs? Okay. Beliefs. All they are a thought process. A thought process or that repeats, which is why we might call it a pattern. A pattern which is running in your client's head. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes when a belief is within our clients, what we call conscious awareness, they will share that with you. They'll tell you about it. Okay, so they express this thought with their words. So this is where I will share with you a very quick, speedy definition of NLP, which is somewhat different. Originally, the L, the linguistic, well, the L stood for linguistic, which is all about language, of course. For me, personally, that L, first and foremost, needs to stand for listen. It's one of the core competencies, isn't it? Listen actively. Because if you're not listening and noticing, it won't matter that your client shares these limiting beliefs with you because you're not going to hear them or listen and notice them. I like to think of having well, I do this several ways. I have a limiting belief dream catcher that catches every single one. It never gets past me. They never get past me. I also like to think of having a limiting belief radar. So my radar goes off. And that's what you need. However you imagine that, you need to be like this. There's a belief. There's a belief. So the first thing is to listen. And then what we're listening for is very specific patterns of language. So language is the second L. Patterns is the P, because I tend to use patterns rather than programming, because programming is a pretty scary word, really, and that's gotten NLP into some trouble over the years, as it sounds like something that we might do to our clients rather than working with them by invitation. So I tend to use patterns. And when they speak and you hear these very specific language patterns, that's telling you what's happening, what the thought process is that's running, again, patterns in their heads. And the heads is the neuro, so the N. Very, very simple. It's gotten rather complicated over the years, so I've brought it back to being simple. Okay? So listen, language, patterns, that's what's going on in your clients' heads. So what we have today are some frameworks and then some examples of these specific patterns that you need to hear. Okay, and then of course we'll move on to then what can you do. Okay, so first of all, this what. Let's have a look. Let me talk about this piece for you. The neurological levels model by Robert Dilts, we run a whole actual separate masterclass on that topic because it is such a valuable and rich model. I've pulled out some pieces from that with respect to beliefs, because we hold beliefs, we create beliefs and hold them at different levels. And the levels that we hold them at around behavior are at what we call the capability or possibility level. And those beliefs, so here comes one pattern already, sound like I can or I can't. And the I can't ones we would normally describe as being a limiting belief. And what, of course, determines whether a belief is supportive or limiting is literally that. Some of our beliefs support us in our lives, and others, those pesky ones that hold us back, those are the ones we refer to as limiting. And I can't tends to fall into that category. And of course, there's that very famous quote, and I think it's Henry Ford. I hope it is, because that's what I've put in the workbook, which is, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you are right. And that ties in really nicely to something that I am going to be mentioning multiple times today. And we cover in each of these sections whether a belief is supportive or limiting matters not to your client. Those beliefs for them equal their sacred truth, their absolute sacred truth. So just looking at that example there, such as, I can't lose weight. Now you as coach may well be thinking, well, that's not true. This client will be able to lose weight with the right support and some work up here and some knowledge about what actually works. You know that. For them, that limiting belief is their sacred truth. And the most useful thing you can do to begin the process of facilitating their change is to recognize that however unhelpful this belief is for your client, it is their sacred truth. And we need to be utterly respectful of that. And the first thing we do in NLP practice before we get to any of this change work is to what we call create rapport, building trust in ICF speak. And we step into our client's model of the world, however you do that, such that you can see out through their eyes, hear what they're hearing, and feel what I can't lose weight actually feels like. And it doesn't feel great. People have asked me, how do you do that? I wasn't sure I even knew when I first started doing this. I could just do it. And that's part of NLP as well, is modeling and asking someone, how do you do that? And when I thought about it, the best way I could describe that process of stepping into somebody's model of the world and trying on their experience is literally, for me, like trying it on. And in my mind, I have a jumper, and you can see I'm a fan of jumpers today. And there will be a jumper of I can't lose weight, and I'll try it on. It's a big jumper, and it's a sad jumper, and it feels horrible. And that's empathy in action. And the really important thing is that you take that jumper back off. It's, you do not want to get in there and commiserate and sympathize with your client. You simply want and need to understand their experience. Because what your client needs from you more than anything else is to feel seen, is to feel heard, is to feel that you are empathetic, that you feel with them, and that you understand. And the way to give them that is to step into their model of the world in the way that I've just described, being respectful of their sacred truth and their limiting beliefs. Okay? Really, really take that on and hang on to that for me. We will come back to it numerous times. And then when we look and we go back to this wonderful model of Robert Dilts, we go up a level, even though it's further down the page, we go up a level from I can't lose weight to I'm just a fat person and I'll never change. And those are what we call identity level beliefs. And not surprisingly, those are harder to change and shift than the ones that are about behavior and doing, because they have become part of who your client is. And beyond that, literally beyond identity, literally, we have beliefs about the world that we live in and the other people, the other inhabitants of that world. And the most limiting of limiting beliefs at the beyond identity level that I think I have ever heard is the example that I share here, which a student on a master's training that I was running many years ago shared during her experience as client during a breakthrough session. And that was, the world is a cruel place and people are spiteful. Oh. We'll come back to this example again. Just for a moment, try that jumper on. Yeah, that's take it off quickly, because that's not great, is it? We come back to that example many times. So there's 3 levels: capability, the I cans and I can'ts, I am statements, and then the beyond identity, limiting beliefs. And there's more learning in there already when we look, which we cover off again, and some similarities between those. I'll never change. There it is, the generalization, never. Those are so intransigent. Never. I'll never change. Now, we all make utterances along those lines in the moment. There's actually been a lot of those this week. Tech never works. It always goes wrong. Why doesn't anything ever go right? And I know to catch those words when I use them and to correct myself and say, well, that's absolute rubbish, Pam, because most of the time, in fact, 99% of the time, tech does work. Most things go right, etc., etc. Not everybody knows how to do that. Firstly, they're not aware that they're doing it and how negative that is and the impact that that has. And they certainly don't know how to challenge themselves, if you like. Okay. And it's really important that we do, because you don't want to be stuck with those beliefs. Hopefully they are fleeting and in the moment. It doesn't mean that we don't think them sometimes. And some people have grown up with beliefs, because beliefs can come from way back when. They can have been given to us by other people and we've kindly accepted them. Some beliefs are held what we call unconsciously, and we're not even aware of them. And on that point, I will share a little bit more. I'll get on my soapbox for a moment. Unconsciously held beliefs. Within NLP, we do have what are traditionally referred to, if you like, techniques. I prefer to call them processes that we can use that will go deeper and will enable a client to uncover their unconsciously held limiting beliefs. Now, most of you know me fairly well from LinkedIn, but perhaps not as well as to know my stance on this. I have always maintained, there's one of those words, that it is not safe to teach those particular techniques online. As such, I do not do that. I also tell all of my students not to use those techniques online. That's why I won't teach them, so that they can't, but if they've gained them from another training. And the reason being, I think it's very simple, and it astonishes me that actually other people are out there teaching these techniques online and using them online. The very simple reason being, as a coach, you could end up in a situation where you simply cannot fulfill your legal duty of care to your client. Because what can happen when we, for example, ask someone to remember the very first time that they experienced or were aware of this limiting belief, what can happen, and what does happen more frequently than you might imagine, is that they, what we call, drop into, in an associated way, a memory, which can be a traumatic memory, and re-experience that event in the memory as though it is happening all over again. And what you can potentially find yourself dealing with is a client who, for all intents and purposes, for those moments, is being a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old or even a pre-verbal child. That, believe you me, is hard enough to deal with in a training room or in a one-to-one in-person setting. It can be dealt with, and I've never lost one yet. Everyone has always come out of that experience better for it, although that can take some time and some processing. You cannot allow that to happen in a Zoom room, because you simply would not be able to do what you needed to do to help that person come back from that place in this situation. And that's the point where you cannot fulfill your legal duty of care. So that is my soapbox piece for the day. And I believe it is important to say it. That is what has ticked the ICF's ethics box. And it is also the reason we have the accreditation, because all of that stuff is not included, basically. For the very first time in many years, actually, partly because we experienced a global pandemic, I will be running a live training this year for some of my students who have done all of the classes already, who want to learn those processes and who intend to use them in person with their clients. That's a very different thing. There needs to be that understanding of what is and what isn't safe to do. So there's my soapbox. I'm putting it away now. It's really important that everybody has that level of understanding. Okay, so that's the what part of it. We have some more on the, well, we have a lot on the what, actually, a lot of me sharing my thoughts on some topics. So some technical stuff in terms of how we describe limiting beliefs within NLP and how they act as a filter. What we mean by filter is, imagine all of this information going on in the outside world coming towards you. And we filter that information because first and foremost, we have to, because if we didn't, and the words there on the page, delete most of it, we would need a lot of mental health support. Too much information, okay? So we have to delete a lot of that information. So think for a moment. Let's take an example we use later on of, I am too old to start a new career. A midlife woman who holds that limiting belief is going to delete any information that others might see as an opportunity because she's too old. So that is how our beliefs act as a filter and delete information, because they just delete anything that's not relevant. And that's not relevant. All of those amazing opportunities and possibilities out there, they're not for me because I'm too old. Beliefs also distort. That's not helpful. Distort, distort, distort. When we're very, very young, think of an example. Mum and dad promised to come and watch the school play or the carol service or sports day. And mum and dad don't turn up. What does a child do with that? So the event is, mum and dad said they'd turn up, mum and dad didn't turn up. What that child does with that is to make it mean something, because we are meaning-making machines. So we attach a meaning to that situation. And that meaning may or may not be accurate. So what might have happened is the car broke down, or another sibling was taken ill, or all sorts of things could have happened. And that child makes it mean mum and dad don't love me. And not only that, if mum and dad don't love me, well, they're my parents and I worship them, and they are all knowing. So if they don't love me, what that must mean is that I'm not lovable. And that really can go down the rabbit hole. And we call that particular pattern of taking an event or a situation and making it equal something, we call that a complex equivalence. And that is how beliefs distort information. And then, of course, there's a good old generalizations. There's all of that information out there. And somehow we have to chunk it down and make it manageable. And so we make rules, we make decisions, we make decisions like, we're back in this place, sadly, the world is a cruel place and people are spiteful. And that limiting decision comes first. And a whole host of limiting beliefs followed on from that decision. It's like a tree, branches come off. And it's interesting because what actually led to the creation of that particular beyond identity level belief, this woman, when she was in reception, first year, very young, first year at school, some other children took her sweets that she'd come to school with and they threw them on the floor. Now, for many of us, that may not sound like a big deal. Clearly, for that woman, as that child, in that moment, at that time, it really was, because that is what she did with it. She didn't think those 3 or 4 children are spiteful. And okay, maybe there's a few more people in the world who would behave like that as well, and I'd want to avoid them. What her brain did with it was the world, based on that one single experience. What she did with it was the world, the whole world is a cruel place, and people, all of the 7.4 billion inhabitants are spiteful. And that went with her through the rest of her life until she turned up at an NLP breakthrough session in her mid-40s. Now, at the time that I met her, she was self-employed, but not through choice. The reason being is that she had not been able to sustain, to manage herself emotionally in the workplace. And it kind of made sense, really, because she had a wonderful, loving personal relationship, no issues in that department. She had a great relationship with her adult children. Mention the workplace, I'm not sure she'd held down any job for very long. and none of her working experiences had been positive, because her colleagues were the equivalent of those children, and the workplace was the equivalent of the school playground. And not only did she delete and not see any positive experiences that were happening in the workplace or opportunities for her, because she could only see the world as a cruel place and people are spiteful, she was actually distorting what she was seeing, other people's behavior, and making it mean, using it as evidence to confirm this belief. And that is quite worrying, because from what she relayed, there were many instances of other people's behavior that perhaps you and I wouldn't consider spiteful. And that was her opinion. Huge generalization that had caused her all sorts of unhappiness. A single event causing a lifetime of unhappiness in that particular context. Thank goodness, only in that context of her life and not across all contexts. So that is the technical piece on filtering, because this is an NLP course and we do have to stick with some of the original stuff. And let's, for a moment, do some Pam stuff, shall we? And a bit more fun stuff. So let's lift the vibe. Let's take off our "the world is a cruel place" sweaters, put them somewhere else for a moment, and let's have a little bit of fun, because this is what we're also here to do, is to learn. And my experience is people learn best when there's some humor involved. So we're all coaches, or at least on the periphery of. And many years ago, I was told that you can't coach wearing pajamas. Okay. I thought, really? Oh, just watch me. And of course, I mean, that was before Zoom, and I still managed it. Nowadays, it's a bit easier. The point that I'm making here is, for that person who shared that thought with me, that was what they believed. And again, for them, that was their sacred truth. And I chose not to take on that belief. I had another opinion on that matter. And over the years, I have met all sorts of beliefs around coaching, which maybe even at the time that I heard them, I didn't think, oh, that's a belief. And it was only when I actually wrote this post for a blog post and for LinkedIn that I kind of put two and two together on all of this. These are all beliefs. These are what one individual thinks. And we are in dangerous territory when an individual elevates their personal hypothesis to a position of truth and then expects other people to agree with them. And if other people don't agree with them, all sorts of arguments happen. And what this person hasn't recognized is that this is their personal hypothesis. It is what they believe. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is true. And that's the key thing about beliefs. They are our sacred truth, and they're not necessarily true. So let's have very quickly some fun with these ones. I hope some of them will make you laugh a little bit. Some big beyond identity. Let's reinforce these DILTS levels. Beyond identity beliefs, global beliefs. Here we go. The ICF is the best coaching organization. EMCC Global is the best coaching organization. The Association for Coaching is the absolute best coaching organization. Except they can't all be true, can they? For the person who said them, that was their truth. This really began to make me think. And now we have some conflicting beliefs here, and I'm sure we've all heard most of them. The benefits of coaching are transformational and life-changing, and I am sure that is one that you all buy into. Oh, look, coaching doesn't work. Well, I've heard people say that. And clearly they believe it. For them, that is their sacred truth. Hopefully we get the opportunity to offer evidence that might make them think otherwise. But you know what? People are often so attached to their beliefs that you can provide all manner of evidence to the contrary, and they choose to carry on believing their beliefs. Coaching is better than therapy. I'm sure we've all heard that one. I'm sure we've heard many coaches say that one. And therapy is better than coaching. I've heard a lot of therapists say that. Again, they can't both be right. So which is it? Identity level beliefs about coaching. I am too old to be a coach. I am not old enough to be a coach. I don't have enough experience to be a coach. I can't coach clients who are older than me. I can't coach clients who are younger than me. I can coach anybody. I can't charge clients until I've finished my training. I am struggling to find clients. Oh, we need to spend some time on these ones. I am struggling to find clients equals I am not good enough at coaching. Now, that's one of those patterns that we've already covered, exactly the same as the little child at the school sports day whose mum and dad don't come. They made that mean mum and dad don't love me. This coach struggling to find clients, that's the situation, has made that mean I am not good enough at coaching. Now, that might be true. However, in my experience, most of the time, 99 times out of 100, that is not true. What that does equal is that coach lacks marketing knowledge and skills. There's a huge gap in knowledge, and it's nothing to do with their coaching skills. Some coaches who I've heard say that are absolutely brilliant coaches. And as time goes by and they don't find clients, they make that mean I'm rubbish at this. They probably are rubbish at marketing and need some help in that department. Now that complex equivalence, that goes into this next stage. If I get more qualifications, therefore, equals I will find clients. No, You probably cannot believe that a training provider is telling you that, because unfortunately, many of my colleagues who are training providers take advantage of that complex equivalence that many coaches have, coming from I'm struggling to find clients equals I am not good enough at coaching, goes on into if I get more clients, if I get more qualifications, therefore, and make myself better at coaching, equals I will find clients. There is a real logic there, but it is flawed. It is what I call wrong thinking. And it makes me really, really cross when some of my colleagues take advantage of that and actually even use it in their marketing and tell coaches that if you come and do my course, you will find more clients. Not true, not unless it's a bloody good marketing course. That probably will make the difference, hopefully, providing the coach implements what they learn, of course. Oh, so that makes me cross. You can probably tell. So I don't know how much money I've taught myself out of over the years, but it's quite a lot. When a coach rings me and says, Pam, if I do your master program, your masterclass program, will I find more clients? And my answer to that is no. Maybe long term, yes, when you are more effective as a coach and you practice those skills and over time become better at what you do, and then word of mouth kicks in and people recommend you, and then you find more clients that way. This is the long game. Maybe, yes, you can make that causal link that, oh yeah, that made a real difference to me learning NLP, but it is not a quick fix. You cannot simply put I've done NLP or any other training on your LinkedIn profile and all of a sudden clients are going to drop off the magic client tree. It just doesn't happen like that. So I really want to share that with you. Okay. So don't do that. Do not equal I'm not good enough. Do not do that to yourself. If you are struggling to find clients, give me a shout. I can recommend some really brilliant marketing training, not by me, by a couple of other people. So, and a marvelous example of a complex equivalence that we can probably, hopefully, all relate to. Capability beliefs. Da, da, da. Oh, I love this list. I'll see how quickly I can read it today. You have to be qualified to be a coach. You don't have to be qualified to be a coach. You need to have experience. You don't need to have experience. Qualifications are more important than experience. It's more important to have experience than qualifications. ICF credentialed coaches are better than and more skilled than all other coaches. I have been told that by an ICF coach in a group situation where not everybody was ICF credentialed. Oh boy, that didn't go down that well. Barefoot Coaching is the best coach training school. Henley Business School is the best. Optimus is the best. The Coaching Academy is the best. Marshall Goldsmith is the best. Coactive Training Institute is the best. I rest my case. They cannot all be true. Be so very careful when you are elevating your personal opinion to a position of truth. Just a simple, subtle difference there. Barefoot Coaching is one of the best. Wow, that makes so much difference. That one word. They truly are. All of them are one of the best. Okay. You have to be ICF credentialed. Otherwise, you're not a real coach. You have to be a postgraduate. You have to have a postgraduate qualification to be successful. Action coach business coaches are not real coaches. I've also heard that one said in a room where there were action coach business coaches. Coaches Oh, now, well, this is relevant. Of course it is. Coaches can use NLP within their coaching practice to be more effective. Well, of course, I believe that. And I think most of you are thinking that might be true, and that's why you're here. NLP does not belong in the coaching space. Well, I've heard that many, many times. And you know what? I can truly understand where that belief comes from, and in some ways agree with it, because NLP in its traditional format, in my opinion, owning what I'm about to say, in my opinion, NLP is not coaching. NLP and coaching are two very different skill sets. And for me, what defines them as being different is that NLP is without a doubt directive. Coaching in its purest form is not supposed to be directive. It is about the client's agenda. So they are completely different. And it has taken me 23 years to work out how to bring those two together such that I haven't got my Venn diagrams with me. There is an overlap. It's quite a small overlap where those two do come together beautifully. Okay. So yes, I can understand and be respectful of where that belief comes from. A few more beliefs about the business of coaching. Nobody, there's a generalization, will pay for coaching. No one knows what coaching is. I can't be successful because there are too many coaches. The market is saturated. Successful coaches have a niche. You don't have to have a niche to be successful. Coaching is worth £50 an hour. It's worth £500 an hour. Charging £500 an hour for coaching is immoral. I have heard all of those. Coaching practice. Coaches shouldn't ever give advice. You can't be a coach and mentor. You can't coach on the phone or Zoom, and yet here we are. Coaching on the phone or Zoom is more effective. Coaching sessions have to be an hour long to be effective. You only need 10 minutes to coach someone. And executive coaches should wear suits like their clients. Absolutely. Who said that? I don't know who said that. These are all beliefs that for the person who said them, it is their sacred truth. And if you don't agree with somebody when they have done this thing of elevating their personal hypothesis to a position of truth, absolutely the best thing that you can do is to be respectful and step into their shoes, try on their perspective, their belief, kind of figure out how they've come to that conclusion. Because in making that effort of being respectful, that creates the best space for negotiation if there needs to be some, rather than argument. Okay? So, and as I suggested at the beginning of this session, this part of the session, you absolutely can coach wearing pajamas. I absolutely promise you, you can. I have proven that belief to be untrue, and I'm sure that person still believes it. So, on that note, let's move on to stories and lies. This is a copy of a LinkedIn post that I wrote. Some thoughts that I have on all of this, because increasingly I am seeing coaches describing their clients' limiting beliefs So let's take the I can't lose weight. I'm just a fat person. I'll never change. So they are taking their clients' limiting beliefs. And because they know that that isn't necessarily true, that with the right support, some help around shifting their mindset, with the right knowledge of what will help them, and then implementing that. So I'm sure it is well intended. What I am seeing is the coaches describing their clients' limiting beliefs as stories, and in some cases, lies even. Now, I understand how that has happened, and I understand where that's coming from, and I understand that it is well intended. It's through eagerness to tell the client, but this isn't true. But the thing is, for the client, it is true. And as I've said many, many times now, it is their sacred truth. Absolutely sacred truth. So by suggesting to the client that this is a story, as in something you're making up, or a lie that you're telling yourself, what that coach isn't doing is taking the time to step into their client's model of the world, trying on those limiting beliefs and seeing the world through that client's eyes, hearing what they hear, feeling and understanding. So not only is this client not going to feel seen and heard and felt and understood, potentially in just the same way as you would if somebody accused you of making something up or lying, when you know that you are being honest. We know how that feels. It feels uncomfortable. I know that when someone says that to me, that I get defensive and annoyed and angry even. It's horrible to be accused of lying. So this really concerns me when I see this. Personally, I don't think that's a great approach. I think those coaches are missing out a whole step, which is essential, which is the rapport piece. It's the building trust. I think you have to do that first before you can help your client unpack these limiting beliefs and have them consider in their own time and in their own way and at their pace that maybe, just maybe, this might not be true and there could be another possibility. But missing that step out really that concerns me when I see this, and I'm seeing it more and more and more. So really, this is food for thought for those of you who perhaps have adopted that approach. Maybe time to step back and think that through based on what you learned today. And as I say, I'm absolutely sure it is well intended and comes from enthusiasm and eagerness. Funnily enough, I've seen it probably more in the health coaching space and the fitness space. And that's why I use that particular example this time around. That's not to say that others aren't doing it as well. So really have a think about that. It's an invitation to rethink that part of your strategy, your practice, or whether it's only your marketing. It could simply be a marketing thing. Again, I'm not sure how helpful that is. Which brings us on to debunking imposter syndrome. Oh, goodness. There's more information on this in the workbook, actually. I must copy that across and pop it in here too. But let me talk about this. Again, this is me. This is everything that I've come to think about these, what are trending topics based on my years and years of experience and what I think about it. And you know what? My understanding in very simple terms of what imposter syndrome is, and I'll come back to my thoughts on labeling this as imposter syndrome, so I'm not sure how helpful that ever was, is that imposter syndrome describes a very specific, what we call cluster of limiting beliefs, a very specific cluster. And one of those, yes, is I am not good enough. And there's a whole lot of them around that, which basically tell us that this person doesn't feel like they belong. And it's often around the workplace. They, even when they have a long list of achievements, they think that they have come by them by accident or default. They didn't deserve them. They didn't deserve to get this job that they have, and they aren't capable. And the overriding sense is that they are going to be found out, that they shouldn't be there, and they're going to be found out. Sooner or later, someone is going to notice all of this stuff that they believe about themselves. And there's the cluster of limiting beliefs that the researchers, I apologize, I don't remember their names off the top of my head, 2 female researchers, and they describe this cluster of beliefs as imposter syndrome. Now, looking at social media over the past couple of years, there has been an explosion in imposter syndrome. Pretty much every day, and that is a generalization, yes, and I believe it's true, you can go online and somebody somewhere will be telling you about their imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome, etc., etc. Now, in some cases, no, actually, I don't think what I'm about to say, I don't think is correct. I was going to say in some cases that might be true, but actually, I don't think anybody who really does have that cluster of limiting beliefs that equals imposter syndrome is going to be talking about it publicly on social media, because their biggest fear is that they're going to be found out. So why would they be putting it out there in the world? So that doesn't even make sense. Anybody who's saying that I have it, really? And you know what? I think what's happened here, this is what I think, and this is what I believe, and you can agree with me or not agree with me. I think what's happened is this, because there is a huge difference between, let's take the I am not good enough, that all of the other stuff hangs, that creates. I am not good enough. There is a huge difference between actually believing that about yourself and experiencing what I refer to as communal garden self-doubt. Because self-doubt is entirely normal. When we start a new job, or we go to university, or we go back into higher education, or any big life changes, it is entirely normal to have the wobbles, as I would call them, to kind of question and say, am I good enough to do this? Am I really good enough? Can I? Oh, blimey. Now I, look what's happened, and now I've got to live up to. That is normal. All of that is entirely normal, unless it tips over into an anxiety that becomes disabling. And some of us are better able to deal with that kind of normal than others. It's what brings some people to coaching. I think back now to a wonderful woman who sought me out when I was running my one-to-one practice in Greece many years ago, 2004, before I went out to live in Canada. And she had been CEO of a huge organization. I was bowled over because I have zero corporate background. So it seemed extraordinary to me that I was the person she had chosen. And basically, she had got a new role coming up, and she was experiencing huge self-doubt despite her huge experience. And what had also happened, it was really sad, and this is kind of our opening conversation, she had lost her life partner. And he was the person who she used to go home to at the end of the day and share all of the stuff. And he was the person that when she had applied for and been offered this new role, she would have sat down and shared with him and said, oh my God, what have I done? Am I good enough? Have I got what it takes? And he would have said, of course you do. And she didn't have that person anymore. And that was what she needed me for. And even though that brought her all the way to Greece, I would still describe that as self-doubt. Asking those questions, it's what keeps us humble as well. So I actually, made up a statistic. I think I put 99.9% of people who think they have imposter syndrome probably don't. And that's because I believe what they're experiencing is self-doubt. They're asking themselves those questions rather than actually being in that space of terror that someone's going to find out that I shouldn't be here, that I don't deserve to be here, that somehow I've talked my way into this and I'm not good enough. It's a huge, huge difference. And I believe that is what has happened. And you know what? It's ironic, isn't it? Because when someone has self-diagnosed and they have chosen to describe their self-doubt as imposter syndrome, they then believe that they have imposter syndrome, And I really do think this is a case of be careful what you wish for, because whilst am I good enough and I am not good enough are this far apart, they're also this close together. And it doesn't take much to flip from one into the other. So I really think this self-diagnosis thing is incredibly unhelpful. And I don't think the original researchers did anybody any favors by adding this label to this cluster of beliefs, because I don't know. I am guessing. I very much doubt that anyone actually sat in those interviews with them and said, I am an imposter. I think they describe feelings that then got labeled in that way. It's a pretty weird thing for anyone to say, or it would be, I am an imposter. Although they probably do now. So labeling, because what that does, think about that model again, it takes it up to the level of identity. I have imposter syndrome. Not helpful, particularly if you don't. But even for those individuals who do have that experience, it's still not helpful. I'm putting it away, the soapbox. Again, food for thought. Da, da, da. We've moved into the how already. I'm just doing a time check, making sure that we have time to do everything that we want to do today. So we have mentioned now several times that patterns, limiting beliefs, are thought processes that become habitual and are therefore patterns. We have talked about how coaches need to listen, because you can hear the patterns that are running in your client's language. So I've moved all of that information that's there on the screen across onto this checklist, which is here in the chat, I think. And we've emailed it out. I've uploaded it here in this section separately. This is all stuff, new stuff, Maggie. Because this is handy, and you can take this with you to sessions if needs be. These are the things that I need to listen for. Okay, so let's run through these quickly, and what we'll find is that we've covered many of them already, because that's how I teach. Number one, anything you can't feel. What that means is when you try on that jumper, the jumper of the world is a cruel place, if you actually even find it hard to put it over your head, that means that your limiting beliefs radar needs to go off. The actual NLP terminology is without hallucinating substantially. If what you are hearing is just in for you to like, that makes no sense to me. I cannot get into that. I can't get this jumper over my head because this is just so far removed from my experience. That is a red flag for you to be thinking, we're probably in the land of limiting beliefs. Another one I remember hearing was, and it's actually when I was teaching about values and beliefs, was the real world doesn't allow you to have your own values and beliefs. Okay, I still can't get my head around that, because everybody has their own values and beliefs. So if the real world doesn't allow you to have them, then which world are you living in? And honestly, I still struggle to get my head to comprehend what that actually means and to be in that space. And that was the overwhelming sense that I had at the time, is where are you then? Because if you're not in the real world, and yeah, the word recluse springs to mind thinking back. Really interesting. So again, I share that with you to kind of explain what this means, because I appreciate that those original NLP words, without hallucinating substantially, are quite odd. The second one, complex equivalence. We have covered that already with the child whose mum and dad don't come to the school play, with the coach who thinks because they haven't got many clients, that must mean that they aren't any good at coaching. They've put the equal sign in the middle, remember? And also, whenever you hear someone say something along the lines of, I am evil or I'm stupid, they've done the same thing. They have made I am equal something that may or may not be true. So they've added a label onto the I am, which really isn't helpful. And then that becomes the belief. And the immediate response to that one that I just want to share is, and what else are you? I'm writing that down because I want to add that to the checklist. Okay, and what else are you? That's the way to move someone out of that place. And that probably would come very early on in any of the work that we did. Modal operators of possibility, we've called these capability. Same thing. It's the capability level in the DILTS model, and possibility when we're talking about modal operators. What the hell are those? Do you know what? It took me 20 years to work that out, and I had an absolute light bulb moment. I'd never understood where that came from, and then it clicked. Modus operandi, the Latin, M-O, how we operate. Why they did that with it, I've no idea, but that's where it comes from. Modal operators of possibility, where the client believes something is not possible. I can't be, I can't have, I can't do. Can add that one on there as well. Do, be, have, I can't do. Listen out for those. Again, limiting belief, radar going off. Have that dream catcher, catch all of them. Negations. That is when we're on number 4 on the list. That is when your client uses negative language. So I don't deserve success. Whenever you hear the negative, okay? Modal operators of necessity. The examples are on the checklist. This is the have to, need to, ought to, must, should. Again, whenever you hear your client using that language, that suggests that they don't have a choice. When someone says, I have to, choice is missing. And again, that is a red flag for limiting beliefs. Comparative deletions, number 6 on the checklist. Whenever there are comparisons. Comparisonitis, not a good condition. He is better than me. She is better than me. I am not as good as. I am not good enough. So whenever there is an ER added onto the end of a word, those are the comparative deletions. And again, whenever anyone is comparing themselves or comparing themselves to another person or to some arbitrary standard, and that's where the deletion piece comes in, I am not good enough, by whose standard? Okay. Again, those are the patterns, the comparisons that we hear go limiting belief. We do a whole masterclass, I think it's number 3 on communication model, where we look at how we challenge these very specific patterns of language by responding in a very particular way. So I am not good enough, as I've just said, by whose standard? So it's about understanding what's missing in that sentence and then retrieving the missing information. Okay, that's what that's all about. I only wish we could cover all of this in more detail today, and I know how long that takes. These are the clues, though. If that's helpful to you, think of yourselves as being detectives. These are the clues and the patterns that we're looking for. That's exactly what detectives do. They look for clues, they look for patterns. 1 time it's not a pattern, 2 times it could be a coincidence, 3 times it is a pattern. Dissociated language, what does that mean? Dissociated language means when your client is kind of relaying some situation to you. So I went into a team meeting at work, and this one particular individual was talking for a lot of the time, and I had something I wanted to say, and I felt I was really struggling to be able to contribute. And you know what that feels like, don't you, when you're left sitting there and you haven't been able to say what you would like to say. And you know how that impacts you for the rest of the day. Now, there is an incredibly subtle shift there, because what people do, initially, the first statements I made began with I, the first person, up to the point where when it becomes too uncomfortable, your client, and that's what I demonstrated, steps back from the feeling that that left them with, and they describe that beginning with you. And you know what that feels like, don't you, when you're left sitting there feeling like you haven't been able to contribute. So they have shifted from owning what they're talking about to placing it outside of themselves, and that is to distance themselves, to dissociate from the discomfort. And again, that is a huge, huge, huge red flag for limiting beliefs. Because if that has happened enough times, that person will probably have done number 2, complex equivalence, and made that scenario that you, not they, but you have been left there unable to contribute. They've probably made that mean something about themselves, and that would be the limiting belief. So you don't hear the limiting belief necessarily, yet what you hear is that very, very subtle shift. And it is subtle. Somebody might even use 1 when one is left sitting there feeling uncomfortable. Okay. Again, a clue. Negative emotions. Oh, well, now in NLP, we describe the four main negative emotions as anger, sadness, fear, and guilt. And supposedly those four cover off all of the others. Any other negative emotion you can think of can come under one of those headings. Although somebody did ask me about jealousy once, and I can't fit that under them. So you can maybe add that one on. Whenever your client talks about any of those, again, it's a red flag. Okay, limiting beliefs. Generalizations on the checklist, not yet on that page. I've added this one. We've covered it already. Always, never, every, nobody, nothing, everything. Those are the generalizations. They are intransigent. They keep people well and truly stuck. And as I say, we all have those thoughts. Hopefully they are fleeting and in the moment, and we catch them and we challenge them and tell ourselves not to be so daft. That's what I normally do. Not everyone has that awareness or that skill level. And again, we cover how to respond to those specifics on that same module, in that same topic, because you, with love and rapport and positive intent, and perhaps while sitting back a little bit, if you are working in person, you can delicately challenge these. And at the same time, I wouldn't want what you had to say if you were using those responses to come across as sarcastic. So this really is with love and rapport. And it's important to challenge them. So always, it always goes wrong. Really? Always? Every single time? So you feed back the generalization. Every single time it's always gone wrong? Well, I'm curious about that, because what I've noticed is that you actually walked into the room earlier today, and that suggests to me that at some point you learned to walk, and that hasn't gone wrong, or something along those lines, because that will shake up somebody's world and they may not be particularly happy about it. And this is where there's a very fine line between working with your client and doing to, and not being directive. So it's a very subtle skill to bring in at exactly the right moment with positive intent. And it is so important that we do challenge those statements when our client is using them with love and kindness, and not let them go. Really important. And that whole within coaching, challenging clients is another topic, isn't it? And the confidence that you need to have and to have built to be able to do that. Okay. So those are our generalizations. The always, never, every, nobody, nothing, nobody loves me, it always goes wrong, it never works. Finally, on the checklist, beliefs about health. Now, we could run a whole extra masterclass on this particular topic. I can provide some resources on it if it is of particular interest to you. Robert Dilts, whose model I referred to earlier, he has done so much work. He is the main man, if you like, who has done all of the work, most of the work on beliefs within NLP. The reason that it was a subject close to his heart was because his mum had received a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis for breast cancer. And that is what motivated him to do all of the work that he did around beliefs. One of his colleagues, Susie Smith, she kind of has also done a huge amount of work in this area, and a lot of what they discovered between them has been adopted by not all, but some healthcare providers in terms of how diagnoses are delivered, because of the impact that, if not done well, that can have. It's a really fascinating area of study and research, and of course there's more research all the time. So essentially what we have here, it's the same, it's what I alluded to when we talked about imposter syndrome, taking a condition up to the identity level by saying I have depression, I have anxiety, means that we begin to identify with the condition, and it means it becomes part of who we are. And that may or may not be helpful. And Susie Smith, and I've always remembered this because it sounded so very odd, she actually did have a pretty stinky cold on the module that I attended. And she said, "Don't worry, I'm fluing," in this amazing American accent. "I'm fluing." And I was like, that just sounded so strange. And that is how she expressed any physical ailment that she had. She expressed them at the behavior level rather than saying, "I've got flu" or "I have flu." And she would advocate that anybody suffering with, and I just use the word that you're not supposed to use, and that is because it is so endemic in our society. She would advocate that you took any condition back down to the behavior level and described it in terms of its process and what was happening, rather than giving it a label and saying, "I have it." Really fascinating field of research there. At some point, I will put together a dedicated class on that topic because it is incredibly interesting. And I think at this stage, when you hear someone who says, for example, "I have anxiety," would simply be to use one of the processes we're going to look now to challenge that and have them examine that and look at how helpful that is for them. I think that's how far we can go with that. So that is how we begin to identify our clients' limiting beliefs. And then what we have a number of processes that we are going to look at and work through, and then have some practice. This one here, how to help your clients examine their limiting beliefs. Questions and statements, I've called this one. Basically has 7 questions. And our objective at this point is really simply to have our client begin to consider whether there might just be another way of looking at this. That's all we're trying to do at this point. And so I'm going to take the belief that we're going to use in a moment that I've mentioned already one time. I am too old to start a new career. And if you are working with a midlife or older woman who said that, the first thing you could say is, what is true about this? because you want to get the lowdown on this. And this is part and parcel of stepping into their model of the world. You want to understand everything that there is to understand about why your client believes this. So that question, what is true about this? And then, is that a belief? And your client might not even know what a belief is. And so you can simply teach them in the way that I have taught you, that a belief is a thought process that we believe or you believe to be true, and it may not necessarily be true. Okay, you can keep it as simple as that. And then step 3, you say, well, you could choose to believe that. Yeah, you could. It's one perspective, for sure, that you're too old to have a new career. And do you have a belief about what should be in this situation? Because we want them to tell us everything that they've got to tell us about this and all of the other beliefs that go with it. Okay, so there's a belief. And this could go on for a whole coaching session. And there's another belief. And there's another one. So we are literally at this point introducing this idea that beliefs are thought processes and they are one way of looking at things. Okay, so some very simple questions and statements to begin that process. And then we move on to the 7-step template. And this is the one that I'm going to get you to work through with each other. I need to bring it up on the screen because have I got it? I hope so. I know, it's in the chat, isn't it? It's in the chat. Let's open it up here. 7-step, there we go. There we are, that's it, that's the one that I wanted. Reason being, my printer did not print the cursive text on the responses. It's not very helpful. So here it is on the screen. Step 1, here we go. So this maps across to the one that we've just looked at. So these you could use either or a combination of, because this step is the same. This is about helping your client realize that they are stuck in one way of looking at this. The I am too old to start a new career. So is that a belief? Are there other ways of thinking about this? And then very tentatively, what if you were to consider another belief? Step 2. So now we are specifically asking them to identify other more helpful beliefs. Okay? With questions like, what other possibilities are there? Can you think of several other possible beliefs that could change how you see this situation? And that in itself could help someone, will help someone move from I am too old to start a new career into, well, I might be old, but I have plenty of experience. Or, and I am a manager. I've been managing our home and family for years. Okay. So step 3, you can then ask your client, and what we're asking them to do is to try the jumper on, so you can explain that process to them. You are asking them to step into, to associate into, which is the opposite, that process we talked about earlier, dissociating, stepping back from. This time, stepping into these other different beliefs, and they're trying them on for size to see if they fit. So they are trying on the jumper of these other beliefs. So, oh, I might be old, but I have plenty of experience. Yeah, that feels better. I am a manager. Too right I am. I've been managing our home and family for years. There's something about putting that jumper on. And that leads to a response of, I actually have a lot of experience and skills to offer. And that moves us on to, you can help your client choose a useful belief by simply asking them, which of these other beliefs, which of them do you think would be most useful as you think about moving into action? And they may refer back to one of those, or that it might all morph into a kind of new one. And this one is, I can bring real value to this role. So we've moved from a place of, I am too old to start a new career, to, I can bring real value to this role by moving the client, by asking questions, powerful questions within the coaching conversation to this point, step 4. And then we can, once we've got that belief, we can switch into step 5, which is more of a classic coaching style. What's next? What is the plan? What steps do you want to take? Well, apply for the job. Oh, what, this job that you were too old for? Rewrite my CV, book an interview coaching session with you. Hooray! That's great. And then we can check that they are ready, of course. So are you ready to commit? What would it take for you to commit? What might stop you? I'm going to go for it. I need your support, but I won't let anything stop me. Well, that anything, that is one of those generalizations. And in this case, it is serving her, because she's not letting anything stop her. Is that a song? It sounds like a song. And that comes to stage 7, which is encouraging your client using accountability questions, of course, asking whether your client wants to be held accountable, because not everybody finds it helpful. And that could sound like, what's the next thing you will do? When will you do it? Would you like to be held accountable? How do you want to report back? And then we've got the make a list of transferable skills, linking them to the job requirements. Yes, please, can we catch up on WhatsApp? So that is the process, 7 steps. We have some more pieces that we can pick and mix and add into this. And what I want to do at this point is to get you to do some practice with each other. And the way that we're going to do this is basically, when you are being client, I don't want you to come up with your own limiting beliefs. We're not doing that today. What I want you to do when you are being client is to think of your most challenging client. And I want you to think of a limiting belief that you have heard them share. And I want you, your coach, to work through this process using that limiting belief. And when you're being client, you're going to answer the questions as though you are being that challenging client. You're going to keep them in mind when you answer these questions, because this is all about enabling your coach to practice, basically. All right, so it's not a role play exactly. You're not making this up. What you're doing is putting yourself in the shoes of your most challenging client and being them for the purposes of this exercise. Okay, and while we get this set up, it would be really great if you could pop in the chat for me. I'm going to stop the share now. If you could pop in the chat some of these limiting beliefs that you have heard. So think of your most challenging client and pop in the chat the biggest limiting belief that they have come out with, the one that you are going to take to this session today as you be them for your coach to practice with. Okay. Fabulous. Let's have a look. What have we got coming up here? Oh, I've got a big chat. I'm going to have a look through this while you're doing the exercises. Not everyone can make a change. I just can't do this. My job, I never have enough time. There's a generalization. I always fail. Yeah, it's too difficult. Compared to what? That's the comparison. I don't have time to delegate. There's a negative statement. Are you seeing the patterns here? When you see all of these are coming from you as individuals based on your individual clients, and yet the patterns and the similarities and the statements, and you begin to think, oh, limiting belief. Everyone has got it sorted, not me. Thank you for that one, Becky. Brilliant. There's the generalization. And another one, everyone always expects me to do it. There's no one else. I can't get a job. The I can't statements, everything I have to do. So everything is the generalization. I have to is the necessity. I'm not ready, the negative. I don't want, negative. I can't say no. That's a can't and a negative. Patterns. Here they are. Okay. And there's a whole other discussion. Yeah, I have autism. I know. I can't be a Nobel winning scientist as I am a woman. I can't. I am on the spectrum. It is challenging. I used to work with students with mental health issues and learning issues at Southampton University, and worked with numerous students with ASD, and the differences between them were quite extraordinary as well, because some were in that space of I can't because I have, and then others were achieving beyond anybody's expectations because they had a very different view and mindset around it. So it's just kind of, it's a whole other masterclass. And thank you. Yes. I don't feel seen. My identities are invisible. Oh, okay. Right. We have got literally just less than 15 minutes to do this. So Zena is going to put everybody into breakout rooms. Please, if when you arrive in your room, if there is nobody there, be patient. They will probably appear. Okay, so Zenat, everybody is off to their rooms. Good luck. Put your hand up if you need to ask a question, and we'll see you back here in just under 15 minutes. Oh, thank you. When you think Museum of Old Beliefs is what we need here, because this is a really, really lovely process. And it begins with stage 1, current beliefs. Again, this is about helping your client think about, is there another way of looking at this? That comes in stage 2. So we've got the current beliefs. Is that a belief? Stage 2, is there another way of looking at this? And the museum of old beliefs, the piece that I want to add, is literally so lovely, because this is the idea, the concept that when you recognize that a belief has gone past its sell-by date and we're in the process of creating a new preferred belief, the idea is that you can place this old belief, you can archive it in the museum of old beliefs, and you can file it there, and your brain will do this for you, in the way that you have filed other beliefs that you used to believe were true. And I'm really sorry if this upsets anybody, but yes, that it does reference Santa Claus there and the Tooth Fairy. So sorry. And you file the belief in that way and in that place. So you're not getting rid of it, because that is almost like self-violence. I know that some coaches get clients to write out their beliefs and then they screw them up and rip them up and burn them in some cases. Your beliefs have served you. And so whilst they may not be useful anymore, actually just binning them off is perhaps not the most compassionate thing to do, okay? Particularly when you think that a belief might actually belong to a younger part of yourself. So the Museum of Old Beliefs is a kinder, more compassionate way of kind of creating this place where these beliefs will no longer hold you back. And if at any time you wanted to revisit them or visit them, you can do so, because they will always be there. Okay. And then moving on from the museum, he goes on to creating desired new beliefs, which is aligned with that previous template. What belief would serve you better? Moving them through to actually trying that on for size, being open to believing. And then the other stage that Robert adds on, which is rather lovely, is the final stage, number 6, of sacred beliefs. And this is about having your client think of a sacred belief, that something they know is absolutely true and is going to happen. And the one that I rely on is, for myself, is that the sun will set in the west this evening. Might not always see it on a day like today. I go with the sunset, not the sunrise. I'm not a morning person. Sunset works for me beautifully. And the idea is that you want your brain to file this belief, the new one that you've just created. So I have a lot of value to bring to this role, but it's kind of, you're not that convinced of it yet because it's very new. You want that belief to take on the qualities of your sacred beliefs. You want I have real value to bring to this role to become this panoramic, beautiful, colorful video of the sun setting in the west, so that you are as inspired by to move forwards and take action and get this job as you are by the sunset. Okay, so there's those 2 extra stages that are rather lovely: the Museum of Old Beliefs and sacred beliefs. So you can run this process throughout. You can bring bits into your coaching. Those of you who coach outside, wow, go with this, because it's a wonderful, wonderful process to work through and step through. Okay, and that's all there on the worksheet for you. So my goodness, when I said we will have a couple of minutes for questions, I kind of really meant it, didn't I? Ideally, we would have had a few more. And as I've already said, I will be here anyway for some time after the call. So worry not. If you have a question you want to ask now, or pop it in the chat, we will get to all of them. But fire away. If you have a question now about anything that we've covered today, let's put your hand up and you can talk to me and I will answer them. I'm really impressed by the chat that's been going on. I had a chance to look at it while you were practicing the exercise. And wow, really impressed by the ideas and the thoughts and the sharing, particularly the discussion about health. Really interesting. And actually, I'll share the transcript with you all as well as the recording, so I think that would be valuable. So, do you have any questions for me before you take off? Because you've all done what was required, and then, as I say, I'm going to be here for a wee while after the call. Oh, I can see a hand. This is Cecilia.
Hi, as a values coach, I often get the question, what's the difference between beliefs and values?
Oh, wow. That is a brilliant question, isn't it? In NLP speak, our values are what are important to us. So when, for example, I can think of a colleague who, if you had asked them what was important to them, their number one value would have been wealth. And on the surface of it, that sounds like a marvelous thing. And it had served him really, really well up to a point. And it's only when you ask the question, why is that important, which is what we do in NLP values elicitation, that he told me a story of when he was 7, 8 years old in the supermarket with his mum, and he found a 50p piece on the floor, so a while back, and his mum took it off him because she needed it for the shopping. And he made a decision. Do you remember I said decisions come before beliefs? He made a decision that day, I am never going to be poor. So that's the limit. Well, that's the decision stroke belief, which actually, ironically, became limiting because he didn't have a choice. I am never going to be poor. There's the generalization. And he was so driven, it served him incredibly well. He was one of the wealthiest people I'd met at that time in my life, in real life, and at his age. He was relatively young, early 40s, paid off his mortgage, all of that stuff. What happened was he wanted to move out to Australia, own a vineyard, and start a coaching business part-time. So he left his incredibly well-paid consultancy role. And within 6 months, he had had what in days gone by would have been described as a breakdown and was hospitalized. And it came down to he could not sustain himself emotionally because he couldn't cope without the big paycheck, because his 8-year-old self was still running his life. And that little boy could not cope. I am never going to be poor. So that is, does that help explain the relationship? The decision came first. Lots of beliefs followed on from that. It may not have appeared to be a limiting belief initially. It had served him well. It was only when he tried to do something that kind of wasn't all about bringing the money in that he experienced those difficulties. And the value was created following on from that decision. So in technical terms, that's how it works. I hope that sort of answers the question for you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's okay. And yes, and then they're in clusters. So you've got the value, you've got the beliefs hanging off it, and the big belief, and then the little beliefs that hang off the big belief. And so they're clustered together. So it can be hard to unpack it, but I hope that example explains it. Okay. Brilliant. That's a really good question. A really, really good question. And that the values elicitation process is when we do that, actually, it is a 5-hour workshop rather than a masterclass, because it is a very long process and we just cannot get it into 2.5 hours. So yes, you live and learn. It's a longer session. So you all did incredibly well to get to the end. Yay. Well done.